Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the session today. We're going to get started here in about a minute. Just waiting for other attendees to show up. All right, well, looks like we just had a fairly significant jump in the attendee count, so why don't we get rolling? Thanks everyone for joining. Hope everyone's doing well given the current global situation. We'll jump right into it here. My name is Jonathan Darden. I'm a director with IBI Group, and I'm currently serving as chair of the ITS Canada Advanced Traffic Management Systems Technical Committee. You should be seeing the agenda on the screen. Should be showing up there now. We have a joint presentation lined up for today. We'll start off with a quick introduction to ITS Canada, then move on to the presentation. For those of you not familiar, ITS Canada defines intelligent transportation systems as the application of advanced and emerging technologies in transportation to save lives, time, money, energy, and the environment. Goals of ITS include moving towards a fully integrated transportation management system, improving efficiency, safety, productivity, and general mobility, while reducing threats to travel safety and security, as well as the negative effects to the environment, such as pollution. ITS Canada strives to foster new ITS applications, promote government industry cooperation, and strengthen the Canadian industry in order to maximize existing infrastructure. Today's webinar is brought to you by the ITS Canada Technical Committees, of which there are 5 in total. You should be seeing a list of the 5 on the screen right now. I'll provide a quick overview of the ATMS Technical Committee, and then we'll check in with the other committee chairs to see if they have any comments to add before we get started. The Advanced Traffic Management System Technical Committee has been created to share best practices and technical information, promote deployment of ITS, encourage open interfaces and standards, and explore innovative systems deployments to increase efficiency and improve productivity. Committee members have the opportunity to be actively involved in priority setting and steering of ITS Canada's activities within this area. Transportation management providers and private sector representatives interested in learning about or sharing information on related technologies and industry trends and playing a role in related policy advocacy are encouraged to contact Yannicka or one of the committee chairs. So that's myself, Jonathan Darden, or Jonathan Ford from KPMG. At this point, I'd like to call on the other committee chairs to say a few words if they'd like to do so. So let's start off with Omar representing ATIS. Are you there, Omar?
Thanks so much. Good afternoon, or maybe good morning to some of you if you're further out west. So I'm Omar Chowdhury from the city of Ottawa. And I'm vice chair of the ATIS committee, which focuses on traveler information. Our chair is Judy Yu from Associated Engineering based out of Calgary. So traveler information has kind of traditionally been thought of as, information related to drivers, especially going back 10, 15 years ago. But that's really now starting to expand as we grow into mass or mobility as a service, connected in autonomous vehicles, which we'll hear about in just a second. Public transit, and there's more and more new ways that people are finding about how to get around and travel. So our goal is ultimately to share experiences and best practices with our committee members, and we run hopefully every other month webinars such as the one that we're having today about topics of interest with our committee. So I look forward to anybody who joining our committee and participating with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Omar. Over to you, Dave, representing the Connected and Autonomous Vehicles Committee.
I'm Dave Michelson, chair of the Technical Committee on Connected Vehicles and Automated Vehicles. I'm based at the University of British Columbia, where we operate the Aurora connected vehicle testbed in association with Rogers Communications as part of the 5G hub. So we've got a lot of exciting things going on, a lot of projects working with Transport Canada, BC Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure, and Rogers that provide many opportunities for members of our committee to get firsthand exposure to leading edge connected vehicle technology. With a lot of the recent developments in connected vehicles, we're seeing some big opportunities to move past some of the inertia that we've been seeing in recent years and really push things forward. So once again, we invite anyone with an interest in leading edge connected vehicle technology to become involved with our committee and take advantage of some of these connections.
Thanks, Dave. And it looks like Brendan just joined. Amazing timing, Brendan. Can you hear us?
I can.
All right, perfect. We were just going through the committees and just like to hand it over to you if you'd like to say a few words on behalf of your committee.
Thank you. Just very quickly, I'm chair of the Advanced Public Transit Systems Committee, and so we focus on transit ITS, and like the others, hold webinars and put together information of benefit to those interested in transit ITS. So I'm just glad to be here and look forward to the presentation.
Great, thanks, Brendan. For more information, you can simply access the ITS Canada website, itscanada.ca. There's a screenshot on the screen right now. Just click on About and Technical Committees for more info and contacts to all the committee chairs and co-chairs. So in terms of the format of the session today, we have one joint presentation. Feel free to submit questions throughout using the questions/chat windows. And at this point, I'd like to pass it over to Jonathan Ford, co-chair of the ATMS Technical Committee, to introduce our presenters. Over to you, Jonathan.
Great, thank you very much. So it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. Today we have Theresa Gaisser. She's the Manager of Engineering at the Regional Transportation Commission, or RTC, of Southern Nevada, where she's looking at the Traffic Management Center, known locally as FAST, or otherwise known as the Freeway and Arterial System of Transportation, where she is responsible for traffic coordination, operations, and communications. She is also heavily involved in special projects to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of incident detection, mitigation, communication, response, and database development. I love how that last one came in because it's so very important in this new mobility world that we're living in. Previously, she served as a principal project engineer and a traffic engineering technician at the RTC, managing traffic operations and incidents throughout the Las Vegas Valley by coordinating traffic signal timing, minimizing construction and special events impacts on traffic, and communicating with other agencies and the public. Before joining the RTC, Gaisser was a senior traffic engineer at Atkins North America for nearly 15 years, and she's worked on a variety of projects ranging from large-scale freeway to major arterial improvements, community betterment, transit, land development, national park, and airports project. So Theresa is a licensed engineer in Nevada, California, Arizona, and Utah, has a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and she's a member of ITE, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, the American Society of Civil Engineers, and the Intelligent Transportation Systems, or Society of Nevada, and IMSA, which is the International Municipal Signal Association. So it's great to have Theresa. And we're also very fortunate to have Tina Quigley join us. She was the former CEO of the RTC of Southern Nevada. So before we get going, Tina will be leading this off, but we have one other key panelist or presenter this morning, Noam. So Noam Maital is the co-founder and CEO of Waycare Technologies, which provides AI-driven cloud-based solutions to optimize municipal traffic management systems. Prior to founding Waycare, Noam led global strategy projects in technology implementation, process innovation, and financial due diligence. Noam holds a BSc and summa cum laude from Babson College with a dual degree in economics and strategic management. And prior to his academic studies, Noam served as a first sergeant in the Israeli Defense Forces. And I had, a good opportunity to meet up with Noam a few years back at the Ways Connected Citizens Program Summit in New York. And from there, I got to see some of the work that he was doing, and that caught my eye because it seemed quite similar to the work that I was doing in Winnipeg. But it's really exciting for me to get to see this presentation, and I hope it's valuable for you to see the work that Noam and Theresa and the RTC has been doing to really bring this convergence of various technologies together to realize benefits for the citizens of the southern region of Nevada. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Tina and Noam and Theresa. And as Jonathan Darden said, feel free to write questions in the box provided, and we'll look to address those after the presentation. So thank you very much.
So Noam, if you okay if I just kind of kick it off and kind of give my perspective as we start?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so this is Tina Quigley. I am the former CEO of the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada and worked closely with Theresa. And as she presents, you'll see we were so lucky to get her. Sharp, strategic, great public speaker, good at communicating really complex issues to those of us who needed it explained simply. As the CEO, I have to tell you, when I was really proud to have been associated with Waycare and the things that they are working on, the things that they did for our community. When Jonathan opened up, he said the purpose of IT Canada was to save time, save lives, save money, and save the environment. And I think that pretty much I found in our relationship with Waycare and the progress that they made in Southern Nevada. The FAST, our Freeway and Arterial System of Transportation, which is our traffic management center, isn't just about one city or one county within our region. It is a regional traffic management center. So Theresa is responsible for the entire region as it relates to and ITS. Whereas in 133 different traffic management centers in Las Vegas, we have one for the entire region. So the partnership that we had with Waycare really was able to effectuate change and improvement across the entire region. So really proud of that. As CEO, when you have to go and explain to your electeds or explain to your public why you're investing in a certain technology, you take a little bit of a risk. So when you can come back and give them hard data as to the reduction in fatalities and accidents, when you can prove to them that you've been able to respond quicker to accidents as a result of this investment, when you can show that there's now collaboration between your highway patrol, your police department, your cities, your emergency response, your tow trucks, when you can prove that to them in a few bullet points and just talking points, is a complete win, not only for your agency, but for your community. And the media loves that. So selfishly, from a CEO's perspective, Waycare made us look good. So that's why I'm excited to help them as they share their story with other communities. I'm done.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks, Tina. And I think we had a bonus about having Tina join. I guess one of the benefits of silver linings of this pandemic is people are at home, and we're able to get Tina to join us, and that's great to get her perspective. So hi everyone, Noam here, CEO, co-founder of Waycare, and me and Theresa are going to do a little bit of a tag team here today. Excited to be here, and thank you guys from ITS Canada for having us. And as I think Jonathan was saying, really the convergence between all the committees and the subject matter expertise that you guys are focusing on is really starting to converge together, as a lot of these topics, which used to be separate divisions, software systems, technology solutions, even hardware, are now all starting to be thought about in concepts about bringing them back together. And so that will also be part of the theme of when we talk about today. But before we start, I mean, I think something that we can all address and have to address is the world we're living in right now in the last few weeks. And speaking of silver linings, this is just really data from yesterday that we pulled together, looking at the last few weeks. So February 15th to 21, this is a heat map of the crashes in Nevada. So the left-hand side, you can see all the incidents and crashes that have occurred over that week. This is before really the shutdown started. And then fast forward a month, we're looking at 14th through 20th. So I hope you guys can see visually that difference. And you may, you know, if you look at the cluster right in the middle there, this is Las Vegas we're looking at. Those are incidents on the left-hand side that are just topped on top of each other. The decline we're seeing is around 53%, which is, you know, massive, probably one of the largest, you know, single month declines that we have seen in the last few years. Obviously, this is not due to Waycare or to measures by RTC or FAST or anyone. This is due to the pandemic and people not being on the road. But I guess there's a silver lining here of knowing that while people are at home self-isolating, there's also a reduction in crashes, which directly means that we'll see reduction in fatalities for this year. And given that in the US, we see upwards of 37,000 fatalities every year, there's a little bit of comfort in that, in knowing that there's a few lives that are being saved by less people being on the road right now. So just wanted to address that because it's impossible not to address the world that we're living in as I take this call from a room in my house rather than my office. Let's kick off today. So a lot to cover, and please share your questions as we go. And we'll try, both Theresa and I, to leave plenty of time for those because that's really where I think we can dive into an interesting discussion. Goal for today is to share with you guys and discuss a little bit about the work we're doing at Waycare around artificial intelligence, particularly with Southern Nevada, and then speak a little more broadly also about transit. And then also share some of the programs we've done there. So Road to Zero, which is use of predictive analytics that Theresa will talk to. And then a little bit of a deep dive of what's coming and what we're working on around specifically connected vehicle data and how that's being deployed on kind of an infrastructureless environment from our side. And then taking from there, just talking about some of the use cases and findings. So to Tina's point, proofs in the pudding. It's one thing to throw the buzzwords out there of AI and cloud, machine learning. What you need to really show for that is also the data behind it and the benefits that the community is seeing, because that's what the community cares about. That's what the elected officials care about. Not everything is a straight linear line of success, and so I think one of the things we'll talk about is also the obstacles. And so, just sharing, frankly, as we adopt new technologies and as we work with these news agencies, what was some of the obstacles that we saw, and Theresa can share that firsthand from working with the team. And then finally, as I mentioned, how does this all relate also into transit, which has been almost a disparate department from the wider transportation aspect, but now we're seeing starting convergence to come together. We do have the benefit of RTC, and Theresa will talk about this, the fact that RTC is not only managing traffic management, but also houses and manages the transit as well. And that gives them a very unique perspective in the country. So before we do that, let me just give a little bit of background. If we go to the next slide. So Waycare, as mentioned, is a cloud-based platform that's leveraging artificial intelligence to use multiple data from multiple data sources to be able to provide operational insights for traffic management in cities and states alike. But I think to that point about artificial intelligence, when we look at today's ITS environment today, we're seeing that the current ATMS and current decision making is mainly done on the infrastructure. So meaning if I have a sensor, I have a camera, I know what's going on. But we all talk about autonomous vehicles, and that may come down the line. But what's coming before that is connectivity from the vehicle. Connecting a vehicle, whether it's through smartphone or through, OBD2 or in-vehicle connectivity, is something that is already happening in massive waves. And we expect over the next 5 years, most vehicles to have some form of connectivity. That is a turning point for the industry, because what it means is now that we have abundance of data that is coming in to our environment, and specifically for the public sector and public transportation sector. But the challenge is how do you take all this data and how do you turn it into actionable insights? Often we like to talk about data, and I think that is sometimes too much the focus because there's an abundance of data. The question is, what are you trying to solve for, and what solutions can you provide that solve for that? AI, beyond being a buzzword, is a very useful tool for specific data analytics when you're talking about various disparate sources of data that need to be synthesized and operationalized in a very short manner, short time span. And so that's really where AI presents opportunity. And for us, that is core focus for us about looking at taking data that's coming both from the infrastructure agnostically, but then also working with a wide array of partners that are coming from the connected vehicle side, whether that's partners like Waze, that we have a two-way data partnership, but also much more granular to OBD2 data, onboard devices that are looking at contextual driver behavior. And later on, I'll get into some examples of what we do with that data as well. But to give more specifics, when you take our platform and you start applying the analytics on top of that and data from multiple sources, so 3 categories, the infrastructure data, which is all the ITS infrastructure, if you will, including mobility and fleets that are owned by agencies, public agencies that have AVL data. And then you combine that with connected vehicle data from multiple sources agnostically. And then the third category, which is the ecosystem, so weather, events, etc. That allows you, once you synthesize that and start training your algorithms that are specifically for operational tools, to come up with the insights that are really providing goals and outcome for the agencies we work with. So we'll talk about incident identification. How do we look at turning something that has been historically done based on 911 calls and kind of a manual, almost analog process into something that is automated, that is driven by algorithms detecting anomalies to be able to respond quicker? And how do you turn that into clear and incident response? How do you identify irregularities in congestion and turn that into, actions that reduce traffic congestion on your roads? So everything we do in our back of our mind is not about, oh, how cool is this technology, or how can we just deploy AI for the sake of AI? Is what is the goal we're trying to achieve for, and then back engineer to that to what is the technology and the algorithms that we need to solve for that, and the data that we're using. So we'll dive into that, and Theresa will actually walk through some of the examples. So I know, I'll let her dive a little deeper in a few more slides. So if we go to the next slide, something that's important to mention, it goes without saying, but AI pairs well with cloud solutions. And the reason I say that is because it's data intensive. Usually AI, which is algorithm based, both machine learning and deep learning, which we apply, is using massive amounts of data from various sources. And so ability to be agnostic, especially in an ITS environment where, and in general in the public transportation space, where it's mired with legacy proprietary systems that don't talk to one another. It's important that we're able to be agnostic to work with all of them, but then also beyond that, be able to be a collaboration tool that enables multiple agencies to work together. And so Theresa will talk about this, but when we started working with RTC in Southern Nevada, we also, with RTC's support, we're working with the regional agencies that are relevant to things like incident management. So when you think about incident management, one thing that the traffic management has to do is better identify the incidents and know where they're happening. But then once you know about it, you have to get it out there to the field. So how do you work with the highway patrol to be able to give them the right information? And similarly for freeway service patrol and maintenance and fire departments, et cetera, et cetera. And so as a cloud-based tool, not only did it pair well with our technology from the AI side, but really enabled agencies that all share the same mission, but have not necessarily worked together on a technology level to be able to start collaborating in a streamlined, interoperable process. So we'll dive a little bit more into the use cases specifically, because I think that's what everyone is interested to hear also of how we've deployed this, what has been the impact, and how does this exactly look like in Southern Nevada. But usually I find it much more helpful to hear that first source. And truly we have pleasure of having Theresa with me here today, who's one of the sharpest minds, I think, in this space, and a leader for Southern Nevada. So it would be great to get your perspective, Theresa, and if you want to maybe kick it off with a little bit of an overview of what RTC does as well.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Noam. And thank you, Noam and Tina and ITS Canada for that great presentation and introduction. I really, really appreciate it. So I am just going to jump right in because, like Noam said, we definitely want to make sure we spend some time on your questions and give you great answers at the end of this. So the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada. If you don't know what part of Southern Nevada we're talking about, we are talking about Las Vegas. 2 million residents live here. We've got about 43 million visitors per year. So we need to make sure that we are managing our traffic and handling our roadways and our network. It's really important. The Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada, we are not on the state level and we are not on the local level. We are in that sweet spot, kind of right in the middle, that regional level. We are, as Tina mentioned, that one-stop shop for the region. We are the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization. We're the transit agency. We're the Streets and Highways Division. We are the Traffic Management and Operations Center. We oversee the FAST division, particularly the one that I am the manager of engineering for. We oversee the freeway and arterial operations for Southern Nevada on behalf of the state DOT and the 6 local agencies. And really, that's a privilege for us. We get that beautiful ability to make sure that there is a seamless flow between our freeways and arterials by managing both the operations of the signals at the signalized intersections, as well as what is happening on the freeway, and that we don't have to go down to the local jurisdiction level to actually make that seamless flow happen, so that the public does not recognize as they are driving through Southern Nevada, they've just crossed from one jurisdiction to the next. And really, that's so important to the traveling public, is that it does seem seamless and that there is a good flow to it. So next slide. Here in Southern Nevada, there are multiple agencies involved. Specifically right here at the Traffic Management Center, there are 4 agencies, primary agencies, co-located at the Southern Nevada Traffic Management Center. We are talking about Nevada Highway Patrol, the Nevada Department of Transportation, the FAST division of the RTC, and the Department of Public Safety, the dispatchers for all freeway-related 911 incidents. And the important things to mention here is we have this great structure. We've got 4 agencies in the same building. The problem was, prior to us looking into and trying and finally adopting the Waycare platform, we had no single joint platform for us to share information. Everybody was working in their own silo, and I don't know if this resonates with you, but really this was a structure that was self-defeating in many cases. We were going above and beyond to try to improve coordination because we simply weren't sharing information. What did we benefit out of this? Coordinating our first responders efforts and being able to share incident information with the traveling public. That is our ultimate goal. And what we needed was a platform that helped us get there. Some of the great things that we have been able to accomplish. One of the most important things that I have to mention about this is prior to the Waycare platform, we had a single source of information flowing into the Traffic Management Center regarding freeway crashes and incidents happening out on our roadways, and that was our 911 dispatchers. And while they are phenomenal, I think that it is important to mention the sources of information, the people who are actually on the roadways, were not always the best sources of information, especially that we have a high population of visitors and tourists in this town. They didn't always know where they were. They weren't always able to describe what was happening. You know, they might have been a little jarred from having maybe been in just a collision or just past a collision. So we had one singular source of information and we were missing the big picture. And this is where Waycare was able to come in and say, there's a great big world of information out there. And I like to think that we were so closed off, and this is the way we've always done it, that we never really took into consideration that bringing in technology was going to open us up to all of these other possibilities. So all of a sudden, Waycare comes in and says, you can get information out of crowdsourcing apps like Waze. You can get it off of social media, because as surprised as I was, I didn't think that people would Facebook a picture, a selfie of themselves having been in a crash prior to calling 911, but in reality, that does happen, and I was shocked by it. What are some of the other things that we were benefiting from? Noam touched on it before. In-vehicle telematics. We didn't really have a way of sourcing that information and knowing what was happening. And I'm not talking on a singular personal identification level. I want to know when enough information is happening in enough vehicles within vehicle telematics that can be aggregated and rolled up and brought into the platform with some level of confidence, saying you've got a good sample set here that's telling you something is happening. Like I said, seamless real-time information of the incidents, better allocation of resources, and really all of this starts lending itself to a reduction of primary and secondary crashes. I think we've gone through pretty much everything on this slide. Next slide. All right. So one of the big benefits that we noticed right out of the gate here is that in the first couple of weeks of this system going live, like I said, we had only previously been using information coming in from our 911 dispatchers. With using the Waycare platform, we were identifying incidents 9 minutes faster on average than what was being brought into the 911 CAD system. What does this mean? This is a game changer. There is nothing that I've ever known in my career that has ever made that kind of an impact and really started to move that mark on emergency incident response and first responders getting to scenes faster. Anybody who deals in the world of emergency incidents and first responders knows that first hour is referred to as the golden hour. If you've got a severe crash and those people need medical attention, their likelihood of survivability increases exponentially if you get them that attention within that first hour. And when you're talking about being able to identify incidents 9 minutes faster, and then you've got a proactive response from your first responders, because they have a snapshot. They know exactly where they're headed with a GPS location on a map. They know what the picture looks like because we've included it in the incident that they are accessing, and they can see exactly what kind of resources they're going to need. That's really changing the dynamic of how you're handling traffic incident management and first responder response. Okay, so we're making great improvements on first responders and incident management. So what do we want to do? We want to start thinking proactively and saying, what do we need to do to stop these crashes or reduce these crashes from happening in the first place? And our Nevada Highway Patrol Division is just really, really innovative when it comes to these kinds of solutions. And we have a great partnership with them and the DOT and Waycare for being able to handle the analytics and running through all the data, because we're all about data-driven decision-making. We want to make sure that we're not being subjective, that the data is there to substantiate what we're doing and that it's working or not working. So Nevada Highway Patrol approached us and said, hey, can you identify high crash, high severity locations? You know, the places where you've typically got that substantial speed differential between your upstream and downstream flows. And it could be based on many different things. You could have it because of construction happening on your roadways. Maybe there's a complex merge or weaves that are geometry issues. And what they really wanted to know is, can we target specific times of days or days of weeks and see what we can do as a strategy? We want like a toolbox that we could put together to see if we implement this, what's going to happen. So we identified a high crash, high severity location. We identified the correct times of the day, or what we felt were going to be the most proponed times of the day. We developed a high visibility platform for the placement of law enforcement, and that's what you can see on the screen right there. It's right off the main line. It's a little bit of a raised platform. It's got protection for our law enforcement vehicle. And then we just developed some targeted messaging, and that messaging is to be deployed on our DMS, our dynamic message signs. At least we needed a location where there were at least 2 DMS devices in advance of this high visibility law enforcement location. And we started trying all different types of messaging. We started with police monitoring ahead. That we eventually wound up changing because it confused some of our motorists, and we got some phone calls about that. But we went with some very basic messaging that said traffic monitoring ahead, and then we just told them what the speed limit was and reinforced it. Speed limit is 65 miles an hour. Through this campaign, this first trial of this, we noticed a 90% of drivers slowed below the 65 mile an hour speed limit, and we saw a 17% reduction in primary crashes. So we knew we were heading in the right direction. So what does this mean? Well, as our lieutenant here always likes to say, he says, you're going to double down on success. Let's see what we can do if we try this in other places. So Nevada Highway Patrol pursued and was awarded the Road to Zero grant for 2019. That allowed them to implement 6 additional sites, and we had these troopers stationed on a rotating basis based on time of day and day of the week, and where we were changing it up on a continuous basis because you need to keep it fresh in the driver's mind. If they're used to seeing that same vehicle parked in the same location every day, their behaviors change, and we didn't want to see that. We wanted to kind of keep them guessing, keep them on their toes. So that strategy definitely seemed to work. If we go to the next slide, we launched this back in October of 2019. We are now approaching 6 months in. For the month of February, here's just a couple of key findings, and I can go through some of what we're seeing here. So at one of our major locations on northbound I-15, our major interstate corridor, during the times of enforcement, we noticed a 47% decrease in crashes. That's exactly what we're looking for. We want to see that we're slowing down traffic, that we're reducing crashes, and that impact is there, and that that strategy is working. So then we go to the second one, and you say, wow, this doesn't really show any change, Theresa. What happened here? So we had to dig a little bit deeper into this and understand what was causing us to not really see any significant reductions in crashes. And what we determined was this really had to do with the placement of this strategic traffic management site with the high visibility platform for the troopers being in a location where there were not multiple DMS devices upstream from there. So that message was not propagating upstream in the system. So as people were approaching this location, they were not changing their driving patterns. And really that goes to show us it has a lot to do on having that full strategy implemented, the high visibility platform, the advanced DMSs, and then being able to see if you're impacting the traveling public and eliciting that response that you're looking for. Obstacles along the way. To say that everything went smoothly would not be true. That's not it. I don't know if this sounds familiar to you, but we heard a lot of, this is the way we've always done it. What's wrong with that? In reality, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know that there are other technologies out there that could be helping you. You don't know that there is other data that maybe you just haven't been exposed to and could benefit what you are trying to accomplish. So how do you get everybody to adopt something new, something that seems drastically different? This did not feel like we were doing hardcore engineering, which is what everybody was used to. This felt, you know, we were verging into the technology side of things, and it just did not feel like familiar territory, which is okay sometimes to get out of your comfort zone, but adoption is going to be a challenge when you're trying to get out of your comfort zone. So what does it take? And I am gonna 100% put this back on Tina Quigley. It really has to do with having the right leadership culture in place. You have to have leadership that says, this is the directive we're going to take. We're going to try new things, and we're going to be okay if we fail, as long as we make sure that we understand what the lessons learned were. And I think it was so important to have that leadership piece in place, because everybody can then get on board with it without that fear of, well, what if it doesn't work, hanging over everybody's head. Tina really did coin the phrase, technology is the new asphalt. And I love that statement. There is always going to be limited funds. There's always going to be some project that's competing against another project. And in the direction that our industry is going, that really is coming down to technology versus infrastructure. You have to be able to figure out ways to do more with less, and you cannot continue to build your way out of oversaturated capacity issues. It's not realistic. So what does that mean? That means you have to maybe take a step back from everything you've thought about with traditional infrastructure and start looking more towards ITS devices and investing in sensors, investing in cameras, investing in a really, really solid fiber optic network to support all of this and have the right trunk lines in place, and then bringing in layers of technology that can harness all of this vital ITS infrastructure that you're investing in away from your typical, dirt and shovel and asphalt projects, and really getting that big bang for the buck and minimizing your cost. One of the great things that I like to say with the Waycare project is we gained all of these benefits. We gained an improvement in our response time, and we've got this great amount of data flowing into the system, and we were able to trial all of these new pilot projects to figure out if Road to Zero was going to be a success, and if we can see construction projects close to or near real time. And we did this all without adding any additional infrastructure to our system. This was all technology based. So with that, I am going to stop talking here for a couple of minutes and turn it back over to Noam.
Thanks, Theresa. And let me add a few things on the insights you were sharing. So one, I'll share that you guys may have seen that the National Safety Council released a little bit ago kind of the 2019 traffic fatalities estimation, and overall there's about a 4% drop across the country, or 2%, sorry, from last year, which is good news from 18. But Nevada actually experienced one of the highest drops in the country, looking at about 14%. Now, it's really almost impossible to separate all the various factors that go into that. But I think overall what you're hearing RTC doing is a direction, not just with what Waycare is doing, but in general in terms of how they're collaborating with other agencies and the proactiveness to adopt new technologies that's helping Southern Nevada and then also Northern Nevada that's using these systems as well achieve that highest mark in the country. The other thing I want to add on is a little bit the back context, the back end or behind the scene context for the incident detection, which Theresa was mentioning, the impact that it's had by the numbers. So what we're doing on the incident detection is using data that's coming from the infrastructure. So we're taking sensor data, as I mentioned, the camera data, and then we're taking also the connected vehicle data. We'll talk in a moment, Waze data, other sources, weather, et cetera, and taking historical data and training our algorithms on learning very granular segments of road on the typical pattern and behavior of that road during various time frames. So using both applied machine learning and deep learning, we're able to start developing these very deep understanding of at a road level, and then tying that in with real-time data, all the same sources I talked about that we pull in historically. And that allows us to start identifying anomalies that are occurring in real time on the road without any intervention, if you will, of someone calling in or anything of that sort. So that anomaly, we set a threshold on the algorithm side that says, okay, because we don't want to just give false alarms that would defeat the purpose. So we have certain thresholds in place to make sure that we're providing high confidence anomalies and incidents. Those are popped up to the operator at FAST, who's now getting an alert that's not coming from necessarily 911 that kickstarts the response, and they will confirm the incident based on this alert, and then send that out to all the agencies that are using the platform as well. And so in Nevada, that will include the Nevada Highway Patrol that have in their vehicle, in the tablet, Waycare access. It will include Freeway Service Patrol, who are in charge of removing the cars from the freeway. And it will include maintenance services as well if there's any damage that's being done to the road. And it even can include other agencies like fire departments in other cities. That not only does you get the earlier response from the anomaly detection on the algorithm side, but then getting that information out in an accurate manner is really, really critical also to that response and clearance time improvement, because one side of the improvement is on the technology side alone of the AI. The other side of it is the fact that we're getting that accurate information quickly out to the right people. And so a quick example that you guys can all relate here probably in your own work around incident management and just getting information out to the public is often when this information goes out with a report of an incident that comes from 911, someone calls in and said, I'm on I-15 on northbound, I think past Charleston. And maybe that person may be right, but actually he's on the off-ramp, which is 50 feet to the right. And so Highway Patrol will come past that intersection and then realize that the incident actually is in another location, right on the off-ramp. So they need to do a whole loop, which takes 5-10 minutes to come around. That's 5-10 minutes that are lost right there on the response. And through the platform, we're enabling them to go really deep into the lat long to confirm the location and share a visual of that directly into a map so that they're getting to the right location. So using the collaboration tool for them as well on the collaboration and communication side is an important factor. So moving forward, I want to talk about, we talked about some of the things we're doing around incident detection. I think maybe one or two more things to add before I want to talk a little more about the connected vehicle aspect of it. Theresa talked about moving from infrastructure to using to technology. And I think that that's a really big shift as we think about data that's out there and the concept that vehicles that are now connected are becoming, if you will, virtual sensors and our virtual infrastructure that will be more and more heavily utilized in ATMS and even transit environment and travel information as a reliancy and a substitute to just your typical infrastructure investment. There's a lot of obvious benefits there. From a cost perspective, it is significantly cheaper to work with data rather than having assets of hardware that you're maintaining for many years forward. B is the longevity of it. If a data provider that you're working with from the crowdsourced vehicle and probe data updates its software firmware system for the tracking or AVL, getting that new update is a matter of hours that will probably happen between 1 and 2 in the morning. If you're going to have to change a puck or sensor on your road, that's a matter of budget and a matter of a project that may take a year or two to do that across an entire freeway. And every 2 years, that technology will change, right? So you'll be using legacy, outdated technology, which I'm sure all of you can relate to the fact that inductive loop sensors, for example, some of them have been in the ground for 10, 15, 20 years. Some of them not working, some working, but changing them out, the pain of that in the budget is a little too big to stomach. And so that's really the benefit that offers. Second thing, and Theresa talked about that with the Road to Zero program, is this mindset shift that we're working with agencies like RTC, moving from a reactive to proactive approach. The thought process throughout the traffic management space and at large in the public transportation space has been, how do I best react to what's happening on the road? As we start using new technology such as artificial intelligence and deep learning, which is a field that allows us to use unstructured data for predictive analytics, we start thinking about how can we actually start looking forward in time and then allocating our scarce resources that we have in the best way to maximize the impact before things happen. And so start mitigating things rather than, or start preventing things rather than just trying to mitigate them after they've occurred. That relates to incidents, it relates to congestion, it relates to transit, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So that's a nice segue, and I'll just mention here, feel free to put questions as we go so we can address them. I'll try and go through this in a few minutes and then open it up for everyone for questions. So transitioning some of the work we're doing now with RTC based on our joint success and doing this in other places, but RTC has been a fantastic partner for us. We've also gone out and brought more and more data, and one of the largest scale deployments across the US, frankly, bringing in connected vehicle data that's coming from multiple sources, as I mentioned. One of those sources really looks heavily at OBD2 data, and that's the telematics data. For those that are not familiar, this is a kind of a dongle that's typically put in a vehicle. It can be an aftermarket device that imagine or think about any commercial or private fleet that has more than 3 or 4 vehicles that you want to manage it for maintenance or for fleet management is going to have one of these devices in it. And it's been used for insurance. It's been used for fleet management for many years now. But this data never has been used in the public transportation space and for traffic management. And it holds some really new and interesting insights that are very relevant. Specifically, it allows us to start looking at the behavior of the driver. So contextual driver behavior data that can give us new insights when paired with AI. Specifically, we look at data like harsh braking, fast acceleration, irregular steering if someone's moving between lanes in a abrupt way, intersection performance and wait times. I'll talk about that. Vehicle direction. All of these things that some of them are things we had maybe from the sensors, but things like harsh braking are data that we never really had the ability to look at and give us the, if you will, the holy grail, which is the driver behavior. Now, Theresa mentioned this, and I'll mention this because it's important, and there'll probably be a question about this. We don't either work with our partners or even take in data that is on an individual level. We get anonymized data that we then do the aggregation and analysis for, because what we are interested in, what the agencies are interested is not, Joe, the driver on the road and his behavior. We're interested in how do we take these data points and use them as patterns for identifying these anomalies around traffic and incident management. So with that said, some of the work we're already doing with Nevada, what you're seeing here is from July to October 2019, we've looked at mapping contextual driver behavior in a heat map around Nevada, comparing it to crashes. And if you look at the right-hand side, which is emergency brakes, and the left-hand side, which is a heat map of crashes, you can see the correlation. And what we've done is gone segment by segment and match the R and the correlation between those two segments, what we found is intuitive but quite astonishing. The fact that driver behavior is a really strong indicator of where the crashes occur means that this is a good indicator to be able to identify crashes, but it also means that often you're able to, if we think about the arrow of time of an incident, start going back in time to know before an incident occurs. If you are seeing these near misses and harsh braking, that is an indicator that incidents are likely to occur in the near future, in the next few minutes, in the next hour, or in general in that section. The other really interesting thing, which is important to mention, is the fact that crashes are not that abundant. Now, I do not mean to minimize that we don't have, millions of crashes every year across the world, but from an AI perspective, near misses happen every day in tenfolds to what we have on crashes, because we can all relate, right? Every day we go out on the highway, you're daydreaming for a second and then you press hard on the brake and you steer away. And that's something that happens often. No crash occurred, but that's an event that created a danger of a near miss. So multiple data points like this allow us to get much more precise on the AI side to give indicators on the likelihood of crashes to occur, which is very relevant. So taking this data, we've turned it, like I said in the earlier slides, into the application for RTC that we're working on now, which is the same incident identification that we're doing today with a small twist, which is meaningful, which is if we are able to take this contextual driver behavior data to give early alerts of not even of an incident yet that's occurring, but something that is an anomaly of a high risk area that may be either an indicator that the incident occurs or that there's something likely dangerous that's happening in the section to be mindful of and try and avert the incident before it occurs as well. So using the CV data to inform, to alert of the incident even when nothing is reported, and B, even when incidents haven't occurred yet, to give early warnings of that happening as well. The second thing, and I'm departing here, is using connected vehicle data. A lot of connected vehicle now are using visual data. And this is used for dash cams. You've probably seen it going into a taxi. There's other fleets that use this as well. And so we are agnostic, we're a cloud-based system. We don't create devices or hardware systems that go out and do this in the field. We partner with everyone out there, and our belief is there's a lot of data out there. It's about how you use it. And so in Nevada, we're working with several companies to take dash cam data with computer vision on top of it to start looking at work zones. One of the big issues you can all relate to is you get permitting data around the city and around the road, a lot of construction happening, but really you have no way of managing when those sites are actually active. You may say, okay, you can start working from July 1 through the end of the July from 9 to 5, but they may be coming at different hours. They may be using some of that time. Knowing when those sites are active and knowing, importantly, when sites are being in construction, active construction that are not permitted, which is often happening, is really important. And until today, eluded most agencies are almost all across the country. So what we're doing is taking the permitting data and then analyzing the computer vision data, as you can see on the right-hand side, to identify cones on the street, cross-reference it, and then alert RTC and the agency. You have, here's permitting data that's active right now. Here's the dash that you can pull the video and actually see it, or vice versa. Here's an active construction site that is not permitted. You likely want to send someone over because this is going to cause congestion and you want to start taking action on that. All of this, I should mention, is being done without any infrastructure. So this is purely based on the crowdsourced and multiple connected vehicle data. The last thing, which I think is maybe the farthest departure from your classic ITS environment, is intersection performance. So when we talk about intersection performance and signal timing, this is where you get into the hardcore traffic engineering. And to date, signal timing in all this world has been driven by what infrastructure do you have at that intersection in that corridor. And what Waycare is doing is using probe data at a very granular level to start understanding stops and directions, and then looking at that over time to understand the performance of an intersection in real time and also in planning mode to say, okay, I am seeing now a certain volume of vehicles go through this intersection at this direction or turning left, and start analyzing and comparing that to typical behavior of that hour, of that day, and providing a high-level view of the intersections across your city or state that allow you to tell on the arterials where you have areas that are underperforming or performing well. And then once you drill down to them at the intersection level, being able to see the direction as well. And that can help inform some of your decisions around signal timing, and even just know where there's issues that are popping up as well from a congestion perspective. Let me, I think last thing I'll do after, I'm going to hand it over back to Theresa and Tina in a moment, but I think I'll jump back into transit as well and what we're doing there. And that is today outside of RTC, hopefully soon with RTC as well, but to share how the convergence of all these things are coming together. I guess you skipped to that slide. So let's talk about transit, I guess, now, and then we'll hand it over. That may be a good segue. So we spoke about mainly traffic management here, and we spoke about use of AI to connect the vehicle. One of the things we've started to also see is that transit agencies were coming and showing interest in helping solve some of their problems around serving their riders and their community. And while there's a plentiful solutions for transit applications out there, the problem is very similar to what I mentioned in the beginning. Transit services are focused on routing and bus services and operational optimization, but it's done in somewhat of a vacuum to the traffic operation side, which obviously is the environment in which they're driving in. And so how do we provide an environment that helps better serve their decisions that they're making around servicing the buses, the scheduling, everything that's done in the systems that they're using today, whether it's Trapeze or other systems that are being used in the field. And obviously on-time performance is kind of a key metric in the transit world that you want to try and address. So example I'll share with you guys here is in Ohio, where we are working with the Central Ohio Transit Authority to help them manage their on-time performance by looking at early incident warnings. So incident, obviously not just crashes, but any anomaly and event happening, to provide early detection that's cross-referenced to the route of the bus. And so where the bus is, we have all the AVL data as well, which is the little dots you see on the map there. And that allows us to give early warning to the supervisors and the dispatchers to say, this bus is heading towards a congestion or an event likely to cause a delay. And we want to either create a reroute, we want to share this information out to the public, and make the decisions ahead of time. Until today, what would happen? The bus would show up into the congestion or the event, call back to the manager, and then the manager essentially would start that process reactively. So again, the goal here was to be proactive on that. That's something that we're now deployed in Ohio. And of course, now one of the things we're doing interestingly with them now is helping them adjust to everything going on in the transit world in terms of the massive reduction that they're seeing in ridership and the limitations on number of passengers with COVID-19 pandemic. That's also something we're addressing. In the larger picture of this, also to mention, we just were awarded together with the Federal Transit Authority a federal grant, the IMI grant with CODA, to be able to deploy this across the entire Central Ohio region with 13 counties coming together and one cloud-based platform. So this will be not just CODA and their platform, but also bringing in together for the first time other transit agencies that start working and talking the same language to be able to use traffic information to better align their first and last mile. And this is in Ohio really interesting, and this is very anecdotal to the rest of the country, where you have a urban population, but a lot of people commuting in from lower incomes, coming from outside suburbs into town, and this is their lifeblood, right? Going in transit. How you patch together in a collaboration multiple various agencies, transit and traffic, working together so that experience for the customer is seamless and flawless as can be. And that's one of the next things that we're working on there. All of this, if I take a step back now, and I'm going to hand it over to Theresa, is in the context of a wider effort, I think, of looking at mobility services and management, not just as an ITS or a traffic management solution, not just traveler information, not just, about autonomous vehicles or public transit. All of it comes together in terms of how do you build a data warehouse that are ingesting data from multiple sources? How do you build environments that are dynamic to adapt to the changes in mobility that are coming? Take, for example, micro-mobility with scooters that until 2017, no one knew was a concept that it would be, and yet it came in less than a year. There's going to be more to come. So how do we get prepared for all of this to come together? But I think it'd be really helpful, maybe Tina or Theresa, to share your thoughts, because you guys are one of the leading agencies, how you see not just today, but also the future of your agency and how you're thinking about doing things as well. And we can wrap it up with that.
Well, I'll go first, Theresa. You're going to be more technically adept at talking about it, but from a CEO level and working with the public and working with boards, I felt that we in Southern Nevada had an extreme, an obligation because of the way, because of our governance structure, because we are public transit, because we are the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the Roadway Planning and Funding Agency, and the Traffic Management Agency for the region, felt a real obligation to be jumping into this conversation about how do we take a multi-pronged approach? How do we take all these traditionally siloed agencies and bring them together to be leveraging each other's data, storing it, and figuring out, how we work collaboratively. And I'll tell you, even in an agency that has that as an umbrella over all those different silos, it is still really difficult. It is difficult to get in the other agencies that were outside of ours. So Nevada Highway Patrol, sometimes even the DRDOT. So this is the vision to have. I love this graph, very simple, talking about all the different modes and data sources that will help us build a truly connected, responsible transportation system. But it's baby steps all along the way. And I think that each one of the different agencies across the United States will take baby steps. And by having webinars like this where we share the information on how we're progressing from those baby steps is going to be really valuable, ultimately, to build not only just regional data and sharing data regionally, but hopefully ultimately a national platform where we have got access to data like this at a national level. Done.
Thanks, Tina. I'll go ahead and jump in right there. So exactly, that's what we're talking about. What do we do beyond just the passenger vehicles? And we know that multi-modes apply out there. So we need to start thinking about how do we bring multiple modes of transportation into a singular platform like a Waycare, where you can provide opportunities to manage your network operations holistically. You want to be able to see not just what your passenger vehicles are doing, but what your freight vehicles are doing. Do you have pedestrian detection systems, maybe at high crash intersections or mid-block crossing locations? You want that pulling back into your system in reality. You want to know, what is your transit system doing? Like Noam mentioned with CODA, what does your on-time performance look like? Do you need to start sharing what's happening on your incident crashes with your commuter traffic to your transit operations? And usually these are separate systems, but even though they're managed under the same house here at RTC, they haven't always had a streamlined way to share that information. So transit doesn't know that there's a crash up ahead and they should be preparing to detour. That very detailed push and pull of driver information coming from connected and autonomous vehicles that Noam was talking about, that's going to be a very large sector of how transportation networks start to function using that level of information in the future. And then add on top of that, you know, the addition of DSRCs, your dedicated short-range communications, your CV2Xs, cellular to vehicle systems that are going to be sharing your SPAT data and your MAP data, your signal phasing and timing operations out to these connected and autonomous vehicles, and also having the ability to broadcast safety messages. All of this starts having an entire system, all of these disparate systems working together now under singular structures. But what's the value to that? Let's go back to what we just can't emphasize enough. Disparate systems are siloed data, and legacy operating systems are slowing down the accessibility of how you can analyze your data. Your data folks need easy accessibility. They need to be able to pull all of this data and not spend 90% of their efforts working on extracting data from all of these separate systems rather than, you know, only 10% of their time analyzing it. You want easy accessibility to data. You want to have some kind of central data repository, and that could take many different shapes and forms depending on the size of your agency and the amount of data that's flowing into it. That could be a data warehouse, that could be a data lake, that could be special words that I'm learning, data mart, things that I didn't even know existed. Really, it's how do you take all of this information and harness the cumulative collective power of your data to improve your network operations. So with that, I think we've pretty much touched on a bunch of stuff. I would love to be able to take this and open this up to questions and answers right now.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Tina, Theresa, Noam, for the very informative presentation. We'll get started with the Q&A, first with questions from the technical committees. We've got about just over 15 minutes for the end of the session. Please remember to submit your questions through the question window if you have any. So first off, starting with the ATMS Technical Committee, and the questions for both RTC and Waycare. We have lots of representation on the session today from public transportation agencies. In addition to ensuring that you have a goal, which was mentioned throughout the presentation, what would you say are the critical prerequisites to have in place to help ensure a pilot is successful using this technology? Let's start off with Theresa. Do you have any comments on that or any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And this goes back to where you're investing in initially. I think that one of the reasons that the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada and the Southern Nevada region was so primed for a technology-based project like Waycare to come along and really have great successes in our region was because we had determined that we needed to invest as a region in our ITS infrastructure. We needed to make sure we had a good, solid fiber optic network. We had multiple sensors and CCTV cameras and DMS signs in place. We had great communication to our traffic signals out in the field. For the majority of them, I would say out of the 1,500 traffic signals here in Southern Nevada, we have direct comm to about 95% of them. So that allows us to use a central system software from the Traffic Management Center to be able to actually change signal patterns as we need to on the fly, depending on the nature of things. But all of that technology aside, I cannot emphasize enough, it always comes down to relationships. Do you have great relationships with your law enforcement, your first responders, your neighboring agencies, with your DOT? So much of this required intense collaboration. And it's easy to build on a success. So once you have tiny little successes, everybody starts to feel a little bit more comfortable with it. But just having that ability to go out there and pursue some of these things, required us to have a lot of upfront collaboration and make sure everybody was on board with why we thought that there was a value to going down this road.
Great, thank you for that. Noam, do you have anything to add?
I mean, a lot, but I think in the interest of time, I think Theresa did a good job summarizing it, and we'll try and get to other questions. Sounds
good. So moving on to the a question coming from the ATIS committee. So it was mentioned about a 9-minute time saving in identifying incidents. So among all of the data sources, CV, OBD, Waze, social media, etc., have you looked at which of the data sources was the most valuable and contributing to the savings?
So really good question. And I think I see also another question here around AI and we didn't, and getting into the weeds on it. So I can almost interweave some of those together. It's when you're applying both machine learning and deep learning, one of the things that the benefits of it is you're able to create neural networks that are using various sources of data in combination together that are varying in their weight of importance. So there could be an incident, for example, where we look and detect an anomaly because we're seeing a variance in the speed data that's coming from the sensors combined with some harsh braking that could give us a certain alert. But likewise, we may not have any variance from the speed layer, but have a significant load of hard braking data. It's hard to tee that out from the algorithmic perspective, and for those that are a little more in this space could understand that. And so we don't know per se. We can't backtrack to say this was the cause, this was the indicator for this incident, or this was the indicator for that incident, because every incident is a combination of multiple sources coming together that give us the confidence on the algorithm side. That being said, what we are doing now is you can do post-analysis to start looking at it and start identifying kind of where there's certain triggers, but it doesn't necessarily work that way. In terms of the AI, whether you're using reinforced learning or recurring neural networks and various formats of that, one of the things that are still being worked on today in the field of AI is being able to reverse engineer the outer layer, which is the output layer, going backtracking to find out exactly the reasonings within the neural network. And that is something that is kind of the next step, if you will, of AI.
Great, thanks for that. I believe you touched on the AI question there at the same time, which is great. So just out of curiosity, with the implementation of this technology, did it help at all to identify any potential issues or anomalies with the sources of data that were being consumed? So potential challenges with the data collected by devices in the field.
Yeah, and I suspect that whoever wrote this question has some issues with their own field devices, as everyone does, given their, as I mentioned, how old some of them are. What we do, part of the first layer of ingesting or the platform, before we apply the AI, you have to make sure you're not having garbage in, garbage out. And so there's a parsing layer that has a cleansing algorithms that look at multiple sources of data. So on the inductive loop side, for example, we'll take the sensor data and use the historical data to quickly identify what a healthy sensor looks like, what a normal count looks like. And you can pretty much get a good sense of it, right, from just running those correlations and seeing where your outliers lie. And then understanding when you're starting to get this faulty data that the sensor is not working or there's something wrong with it. And what we'll do then is chuck that data out, and we have two options. We can either not use that sensor or not rely on it, or what we can do is simulate, what we know. If we have years of data for that sensor, we're able to fill the gap of whatever that time frame would be with data that is, will be simulated of what it should be based on the references that we have. So it is an issue that we deal with often, and the way we deal with it is doing that first level of analysis to make sure that we chuck out any faulty data and then either don't use it or don't use the sensor data at all for that case, or fill it in with data that we feel is representative of it that can still be really meaningful for the training of the algorithms.
Great, thanks for that, Noam. Next question comes from Brendan, representing the APTS committee. And the question is, do you have CCTV coverage everywhere? For example, Waze data and other sources may indicate a potential incident, but how do you validate an incident and its severity on a ramp? As per the example that was provided without CCTV.
Yeah, so what I can tell you is we are very fortunate in Southern Nevada. We have a really good CCTV coverage. We have about 800 CCTV cameras in our system. They are spread throughout the arterial and most of the signalized intersections. However, the Southern Nevada region is massive. It is very large. It is extensive. It does extend to many rural areas, and we do not have CCTV coverage in some of those places. So in direct answer to what you're talking about here, the question about can you use, maybe if somebody is tagging in through Waze, can we then see that in the Waycare platform and substantiate that even without CCTV coverage? The answer that we've actually found to be true is yes, we can, because what's happening is there is layers in the Waycare platform, and you guys have probably seen them too, just like you turn on a traffic layer in the Google Maps platforms, you can actually see what the speeds of your freeways and arterials are for the most part acting like at that given moment. So you see that green usually indicates free flow speeds, yellow is telling you you've got some slowing below speed limits, and then red is usually your indicator that you've got stopped traffic or substantially slowed traffic. So when you couple that insight of maybe somebody potentially or multiple people tagging in through social media or crowdsourcing, and then that being pulled into the Waycare platform, even without CCTVs available, you can still look at those traffic heat maps of those speed flows and see that, you know what, that does look like we are getting some slowing or some congestion or maybe a building queue in that vicinity, which is usually a good indication you've got something actually happening there.
Great, thanks for that. So moving on to questions from the attendees. So just reviewing the list here. So first question, crowdsourced data was mentioned. Can you please describe or provide more information around data flow with regards to how the system was implemented? Any additional information on additional data sources and any info you may have on required latency required for your analysis?
Sure. So let me break that down a little bit. The latency I'll address in a moment. So the data sources I mentioned break out into three. There's the infrastructure data, which again, as a cloud-based platform, we come in and we say, before we even talk about integration, we want to pull out the data because that's fairly easy to do. If an agency is more advanced and has APIs, like a lot of what Jonathan has done in Winnipeg, then fantastic. If it's a really legacy-based system, we can work with automated queries and pull that into our environment as well. Whether that's the DMS, the signal, the sensors, the cameras, the AVL data, et cetera. Then we go from our partnerships across the private sector in the mobility space, and we work pretty wide and agnostic. So there's three categories of mobility data. We work with the smartphone navigation-based data, so partnerships like Waze and Google's and others that we pull. And with Waze, by the way, we have a two-way API, so we pull in data, but then we also push out data to the public through them. And then the other category is telematics. We spoke about that, and that really is the aftermarket commercial fleets. There's an abundance of data, millions of vehicles on the road driving very frequently as well. And then the more advanced one that's coming about, that's still in early stages, but OEMs are really looking deeper into it now, is connected vehicles from within the vehicle, right? So the vehicle comes off the lot with connected ability, and then you start even getting richer data environments that look at road surface conditions and things of that sort. So that's the vehicle type of data. And the third bucket is the ecosystem. So everything coming in from weather alerts to events, not just sporting events, but concerts, smaller events, and pulling all the information in from the ecosystem, All of that's cloud-based, so either we pull it via an API or an automated query, synthesize it, and do cleansing algorithms in the cloud. We use AWS. And then once it's parsed and cleansed, we then apply the algorithms that are operational, whether it's instant detection or transit services that we talked about, or predictive analytics, or any one of those various kind of things that are all converged together on the platform. In terms of latency, it varies by data source, but one of the things that's really important to us, I always say to my team that perfection is the enemy of good. And one of the things that we look at is, what is the reality today? There's a lot of talk, especially on the autonomous vehicle side, about DSRC 5G and getting down to the millisecond, and that's important. We're going to get there. But right now, we have wireless network pretty much across the entire US and connectivity out there that enable us to get crowdsourced information and infrastructure data at latencies that are anywhere from seconds all the way up to 5 to 10 seconds, and at worst, 15 seconds up to a minute. But even if you're getting data at latencies of a minute, that is still vast improvement from what you have today. So there's not rule of thumb that we work with data that only crosses a certain threshold. Obviously, if it's more than 5, 10, 15 minutes, we're not going to use it because it's still data. But we do use data that has latency of 15, 30 seconds, a minute, and it varies based on the vendor and based on the infrastructure that we work with, just on the connectivity that they have. But typically, it will range anywhere from 1 second that we'll pull and refresh to 15 seconds. That's kind of the typical time frame of the data sets that we're working with.
Great, thanks. Next question, and then this is for RTC. In addition to targeted enforcement, what other collision prevention interventions are being deployed in response to the information and insights gained from the use of the Waycare platform?
That's a great question. So we have been working very closely. There is a whole predictive layer built into the Waycare platform that lets us see in 2-hour look-ahead increments what are the potential locations, highest potential locations for crash incidents. And like I said, it's in a 2-hour increments for a look-ahead. And really, what that allows us to do, this is pulling so much of that AI deep learning information. It's determining what are the historical trends, what are the historical patterns, do we have construction in the area, which is all being brought in through APIs flowing into the system. Weather information, do we have maybe a storm, a monsoon approaching? All of this information is being rolled into that look ahead to give us those predictive locations. And once we know those predictive locations, proactively, law enforcement can be out there staging or monitoring, and that allows them the opportunity to better allocate their resources and pre-position if there is an enhanced possibility that they foresee these crash locations being higher in the next 2 hours based on the information that we're getting back from the platform.
Great, thank you for that. And it looks like we've just run out of time. So once again, thank you, Tina, Theresa, Noam, for taking the time, preparing, and presenting a lot of really valuable and interesting information to the group today. Lots of interesting dialogue and questions as well. The contact information for Theresa and Noam's on the screen right now, so make note of that. Also, the recording of this webinar will be posted to the ITS Canada YouTube channel, and a link will be sent out to all attendees as well. Just quickly, as we've run out of time, there is a session being scheduled for March 31st. It's a public sector operations centers and COVID-19 discussion. It's by invite only. If any public sector attendees are interested in that, please reach out to Yannicka for more information. So again, thanks to our presenters today. Thanks to our attendees, and have a great day. Stay safe out there.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, folks.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a great